On most maps, roads appear everywhere. Highways, bridges, rail lines. Human civilization is built on the idea that every place should be reachable. But there are regions on Earth where something unusual happens. No highways appear, no roads connect the settlements. Not because engineers failed, not because the terrain is impossible, but because someone decided the roads should never exist. 1. The largest roadless region in the United States. In northern Alaska lies one of the largest roadless areas on Earth. It is known as the Alaska North Slope. Stretching from the Brooks Range to the Arctic Ocean, the region covers over 200,000 square kilometers. And yet, across this vast expanse, something is missing. There are almost no permanent public roads. The towns here, including Utqiagvik, formerly known as Barrow, cannot be reached by car. There is no highway, no connecting road network. The only way in or out is by airplane or seasonal ice routes. At first glance, this seems strange. After all, Alaska is part of the United States, a country defined by highways and infrastructure. But the absence of roads here is not an accident, it is policy. Much of the North Slope lies inside protected Arctic ecosystems and lands controlled by indigenous communities. Roads would fragment migration routes used by caribou herds, disturb fragile tundra soil, and permanently alter one of the most sensitive environments on Earth. So instead of expanding access, the decision was made to keep the region disconnected. 2. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Just east of the North Slope lies a place even more remote, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This protected area spans over 78,000 square kilometers. Across its entire landscape, there are no permanent roads at all. None. Not one public highway enters the refuge, not a single road crosses the mountains or tundra. For decades, this isolation has been fiercely protected, because roads do something subtle but irreversible. They allow constant human access. And once a road exists, development inevitably follows. The refuge protects one of the last intact Arctic ecosystems on the planet. Migrating caribou, polar bears, Arctic foxes, species that rely on enormous uninterrupted territories. A single highway cutting across the refuge could permanently change those migration patterns. So the land remains roadless by design. 3. Siberia's infrastructure. Void. Across the Arctic Ocean lies another vast roadless region, eastern Siberia. At first glance, it appears that Siberia simply lacks roads because the environment is harsh. But that explanation is only partly true. Take the Sakha Republic, the largest administrative region in Russia. It covers an area larger than India, yet outside a few limited corridors, enormous portions of the territory remain completely disconnected by road. Even major settlements rely heavily on winter roads, temporary routes that exist only when rivers freeze. For most of the year, these connections disappear. Why? Because building permanent roads across permafrost landscapes creates a serious engineering problem. When roads absorb sunlight, they warm the ground beneath them. That heat melts the frozen soil. And when permafrost melts, the ground collapses. Entire sections of highway can literally sink into the earth. In some areas, maintaining permanent roads would require continuous rebuilding. So large parts of Siberia remain functionally roadless. Not because they cannot be built, but because the landscape refuses to hold them. 4. The Darién Gap. Perhaps the most famous roadless region in the world lies between two continents, the Darién Gap, a dense jungle spanning the border of Panama and Colombia. Everywhere else in the Americas, highways connect the continent. From Alaska to Argentina, the Pan-American Highway runs for tens of thousands of kilometers. But here the road suddenly stops, and then it disappears. For nearly 100 kilometers, there is no highway at all. Not because engineers couldn't build one. In fact, several attempts were made. But the gap remains roadless for 3 reasons. First, the terrain. Swamps, rivers, Mountains and dense rainforest make construction extremely difficult. Second, biodiversity. The Darién region is one of the most biologically rich areas on Earth. A highway would divide fragile ecosystems and accelerate deforestation. But the third reason is more complex: security. For decades, armed groups and smuggling networks have operated inside the jungle. A permanent highway would dramatically change migration patterns and cross-border movement. So despite multiple proposals, the road has never been completed, and the Pan-American highway still ends here. Five, the roadless zones of the Amazon. Further south lies another vast region where roads remain intentionally limited: the Amazon basin. In Brazil alone, massive areas of rainforest have been designated as indigenous territories or conservation zones. Within these regions, roads are strictly restricted or banned entirely, because once a road enters the forest, a predictable chain reaction begins. Logging follows, then mining, then settlement. Satellite imagery shows a pattern repeated again and again. A single road cuts into the jungle. Within years, entire networks branch outward. The forest disappears in expanding geometric patterns. To prevent this, many Amazon regions remain roadless buffers, places where access is deliberately limited, not because humans cannot reach them, but because the consequences of easy access would be permanent. Roads are usually symbols of progress. They connect economies, they move people, they expand civilization. But in certain places, roads create more problems than solutions. They fragment ecosystems. They accelerate resource extraction. They destabilize fragile landscapes. And sometimes they open regions that were never meant to support large populations. So instead of building roads everywhere, some governments, communities, and environmental groups have chosen a different strategy. Leave the roads unbuilt and leave the land alone. On a map, roads look like thin lines, but those lines change everything. They reshape landscapes, they redirect migration. They determine where cities grow and where wilderness survives. And in a few rare places on Earth, the most important decision wasn't where to build a road, it was where not to build one. If you could explore one roadless region on Earth, where would it be?